Upon adopting a stray Doberman that never stops barking, a family assumes that because the dog has a home of its own, it won't annoy them at any time of day. But a few days later, the dog runs off into the night, and the family's children are forced to go after it after hearing an awful scream. Welcome to USA Stories channel. Do not forget to subscribe and activate the bell button to receive all new updates. Now let's go to the story. They come to understand that the dog has been trying to talk to them the entire time. The last scenes have become quite the show as the stray dog has been lingering around the house for the last 3 days. They were not major pet lovers, so it did not set well with them. Flora and Daniel, the children, would occasionally attempt to chase it away. Nonetheless, it would just groan and remain in the corner. The worst thing about it was its propensity of barking non-stop in front of their house. They reasoned that since it seemed quite well groomed and fed, it hadn't always been a stray. However, the family felt that it was no longer their family because of something about its attitude. One evening, Flora and Daniel decided to approach it, and the dog avoided attacking them. All it did was sit there, looking at them and waving its tail. "Perhaps he's lost and needs somewhere to stay," Flora remarked. "Let's talk to Mom and Dad. Maybe he could stay with us," Daniel said, and his sister agreed. Together, they returned to their parents. Their mother was not very excited about the prospect of having a pet, but their father shrugged and said he wouldn't mind. However, there would need to be certain ground rules. The dog could not enter the house, and the children would have to provide all of the dog's needs. In addition, it would have to sleep outside in all kinds of weather. Flora and Daniel considered their options and determined that it was a decent offer, then went back outside to move the puppy to the front porch, where they planned to build him a cozy resting space. But the dog kept returning to the entrance of the enclosure, where they had originally seen him. The kids didn't know what to do in the end, so they let him stay wherever he was most at ease and went doghouse shopping. Flora said, "Let's call him Rocky," as they assembled. "Why Rocky?" Daniel asked inquisitively. In response, she said, "He's as stubborn as a rock. Whether we attempted to shoo him away, or whether we wanted to keep him safe, he never paid attention." Her brother regarded the dog for a moment before glaring at her. "We need to wash him and give him a collar so that he doesn't get stolen or lost." "Well, we don't exactly own him, so maybe his owner will come for him someday," Flora said. After giving him a thorough wash, they were happy to see that he looked like a healthy dog once again. When the kids searched up Dobermans on Google later that day, they saw that Rocky was far more affectionate and loved than other dogs of his kind. Their mother said, "I wonder if you will stop barking now that we have taken him in." Flora and Daniel had similar hopes. They had not slept properly for far too long, so they were unable to focus on their studies throughout the day. They made the decision to take him to the veterinarian the next day if he continued to bark so much. That evening, the family had just finished dinner, and the warmth of their shared meal permeated the air. Rocky was laying by the front door, looking dejected despite having a full bowl of dog food in front of him. Flora, whose desk was cluttered with textbooks, hurried to her room as night fell to finish her schoolwork. She could see Rocky outside her window, and for some reason, she started to see him as a protector, which provided her a sense of security. She hoped that now that they had adopted him, he would also feel at home and that his incessant barking would stop. But that night, at exactly 12, Rocky began barking again. She saw him thrashing around as if he was seeing something she wasn't as she looked out the window. Her heart was broken by what she saw. She asked, "Rocky, why do you bark so much?" She questioned, "Do you need to tell us something?" To no one in specific. She tried to ignore the sound of his barking, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the dog was desperately trying to attract someone's attention. Her brother had assured her that they would get instructions to prepare for their veterinary visit the next morning. The vet examined the dog and found no signs of hidden diseases or injuries that may be the cause of his incessant barking. However, when examining his chip, he found that he belonged to a family that lived a few towns away. He promised to call his rightful owners as soon as he could and told the youngsters to keep him safe until they could find them. For the following few days, Rocky never stopped barking. The children's mother was at her wit's end, and to be honest, they were becoming tired of a dog that did nothing but bark and run around. They'd thought that owning a pet would be fun, but Rocky's behavior was just bothersome. Laura held onto his collar, worried that if she let go, he might attack the old man. She refused to let go of the collar until Daniel calmed Rocky down. They managed to tether Rocky to a post and rushed to help the man who had fallen on the street. "We are truly sorry for that," the siblings said. "If you cannot train a dog, why have one?" The man was furious with them as he gazed at his injured knee. He got up and started to walk away, but the dog did not stop barking. "Why doesn't Rocky like him?" Daniel asked. "He's just an old man," Flora shrugged. The two children informed their parents of the veterinarian's diagnosis as soon as they arrived home. Since their mother disliked pets in the first place, and this dog was preventing her from sleeping through the night, she was upset. She threatened her children, telling them that if they couldn't find a method to keep Rocky quiet, they would have to turn him over to a shelter. Flora and Daniel were concerned and made the decision to watch the dog more carefully that evening. Later that night, the kids deliberately refrained from talking to their parents about their concerns. They motioned for Rocky to come over as soon as the rest of the light disappeared from outside. They didn't think he would, but to their surprise, he did listen to them. But he started flailing about madly, just like yesterday. But this time, Rocky did more than just bark and thrash, added Flora. He bolted forward, racing to the other side of the road, seeing that he had at last attracted someone's notice. The siblings followed him, their expressions bewildered. What made him want to go there? They needed to know. They hadn't gone too far because Rocky was standing in front of a rock wall covered in leaves and twigs and waving his tail. Daniel and Flora looked about but saw nothing of importance. But before they could do anything more, they heard a vehicle driving up from the distance, so they quickly ran for safety and quiet. Someone was observed leaving the car with a small limp. When Flora saw him with a walking stick, all she could think of was the old guy they had seen earlier. He went to the rock wall and promptly moved some twigs out of the path when he was outdoors. The youngsters were amazed when he showed them the entrance to a cave carved out of the rock. After 10 minutes or so, they heard a little cry coming from within the cave where the man had entered holding a sack. Rocky growled, but Flora gave him a tight hug. Daniel began to up and reach for the rock, but his sister stopped him. "That was not an elderly man's wail," she remarked. The voice had a girly quality to it. The siblings stayed still for a while, and then the man returned. Daniel limped over to the car and scrawled down his license plate number. As the man drove away, they continued approaching the cave and were astounded by what they saw. The missing girl was there, tied with a rope around a chair. Her face was covered in blood and her clothes were torn. Flora immediately covered her up by removing her jacket. Daniel was fortunate to have his phone with him, and he quickly called 911 before calling his parents. Flora's scared cry went over the phone, and they hurried to the woods to comfort their children. The dog was bouncing around the unconscious female and waving his tail. Upon arrival of the ambulance, they took the kids' statements and took her right away to the hospital. The offender was the dog. Though we had thought he was simply being a bother, it turned out he had been trying to entice us here, Daniel stated. "I have the man's license plate number," he said. The officer remarked, "Okay, kids, it's time for you to get home. We'll get back to you in the morning." The parents took their children home while the policeman made sure the place was secure. But the dog didn't stay with them. He followed the missing girl to the hospital where he stayed up all night keeping an eye on her bed. The employees tried to shoo him away, but he kept coming back. When her parents arrived in the morning, they were ecstatic to meet the dog. Flora, Daniel, and their parents arrived at the hospital with them quite early in the morning. "Cody, we thought we lost you," the missing girl's mother wailed. Flora approached the screams and said, "Cody." They all went inside the room where Cynthia, the missing child's parents, welcomed the puppy with open arms. "Yes, he is Cynthia's dog, and they went missing together," the mother said. "So Cody had been trying to call our attention to what had happened to her," Daniel clarified, and his mother felt guilty for ignoring the dog. When the police came, they said that the suspect was now in custody. Yes, this was the same man Rocky had tried to stab in the back when he came back from the vet. He had kidnapped Cynthia in an attempt to get revenge on his father, a lawyer who had successfully prosecuted him. The decision left him all but penniless, and he felt a great deal of animosity against the man. He had kidnapped Cynthia as she was out on a stroll with Cody. The unfortunate dog, unable to go through the tunnel in the rock wall on his own, has since been trying to alert the neighbors. He'd been able to recruit Cynthia's help, and he hadn't actually left her side. As a keeper, Cody had just saved his owner from death. Many people who had previously been dubious or even hostile toward the dog were eventually persuaded to reconsider after hearing Rocky's amazing tale. Some even complimented Cynthia's parents for raising a dog with such manners. Others were inspired by Rocky's story to look past external appearances and concentrate on the smallest details, regardless of how they were shown. The dog had to be returned to its original owner, so Flora and Daniel were unable to keep it. Cynthia went to meet the Finn kids to thank them for saving her life after recovering for a week. "Oh no, not too much got done," said Flora. "I must say you are one lucky girl to have such a dog, even though Cody did the most of it." Daniel added, "Look, we have decided to adopt our own dog too, and we named him Sky," they said, flaunting their Doberman. Cynthia smiled at the dog, and after saying thank you, they became friendly. What a charming ending! How would you respond if you heard a dog barking all the time, day or night? Would you chase it if it vanished in the middle of the night? Tell us in the comments section below. Please remember to subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our videos. If you enjoyed the tale, the next video that plays on your screen will probably move you too.